People like you don't belong here. That's what Meline Cross said to my face. HOA president smile, ice-cold eyes, as she tried to kick me off the $15 million ranch I'd built from a 20-cent wasteland. And while the fluorescent lights in that sterile conference room buzzed like a lie detector, my fields rolled out in the window like a dare. I kept my mouth shut, let her monologue about community standards and aesthetics, then pictured the first time I stood on that cursed ground. Dead grass crunching to my knees, the smell of metal and rot in the air, and thought, yeah, say that again to the dirt that remembers everything. Let me back up a sec. I was 42, a burned-out Silicon Valley engineer who'd lost my wife, Emily, to cancer, and then lost myself. A broker whispered about this place on Lake Pinewood, Colorado, 50 acres priced at 20 cents a square foot, like somebody was trying to pay me to take it, and grief does the math differently. You know what I mean? Tom Bradley, neighbor, 70, weathered as fence cedar, met me at the fence line with a cap in his hands and the kind of eyes men get when they've buried too much. Told me Apex Mining stripped copper here, left poison in the soil and lawyers in the courthouse, and anyone who tried to plant so much as a prayer, it died. That night, I read filings until the screen burned my retinas, sealed settlements, shell subsidiaries, a shadow firm that settled everything and fixed nothing. And the only thing rising in me was a feeling I hadn't had since Emily. Purpose. I built an innocent gardener's shed and stuffed it with sensors disguised as river rocks, fungi cultured from the pines, a compost system I called resurrection soil, temperature, pH, humidity, all handled by a mesh of IoT guts and duct tape genius. And in 72 days the dirt came back breathing. It wasn't pretty, not at first, but microbial density jumped. Worms started writing love letters under the surface, and when ground level looked like a park, beneath it I carved a quiet cathedral. Hydroponic channels, climate tunnels, irrigation arteries. A heartbeat nobody could see from a drone. Yeah, that happened. On week 2, a black BMW slid to a stop and out stepped Meline. Tailored suit, handshake like a contract you shouldn't sign. She said she represented lakefront community interests, which sounded like a warning with lipstick, eyed my boundaries like a chessboard, lingered on the lake access a beat too long, then purred something about maintaining standards. Tom watched from his property line, jaw clenched. She cost us our home 3 years back, he said softly. Used the rulebook like a whip. I logged her plate, her smile, her tells. In tech you learn to map attack surfaces, and Meline had attack surfaces dressed as good intentions. 6 months in, Professor Michael Thompson from Colorado State crouched in my fields like a kid with a magnifying glass, let soil run through his fingers, said he'd studied dirt for 30 years and never seen contaminated earth recover this fast. I shrugged and showed him the fungi footprints and the compost curves. But here's the truth. The crown jewel wasn't up top. It was the city beneath my lawn and the discipline to keep it invisible. When the first fruits came, 2 tons a month, tomatoes that tasted like someone turned the volume knob to 11. Word spread sideways through kitchens and farmers markets. Brett Williams rang my bell, a startup guy with a scruffy grin and a product called Green Trace to track food origins and quality metrics on chain, pitched me on scaling with transparency. I told him we could try. He told me he'd bring the map. Then the floor dropped. Digging through old Apex records, bankruptcy husks, engineering reports buried on purpose, I found research showing they knew how to remediate their own mess and hid it because cleanups would cost billions. And I realized the 20-cent price tag wasn't a discount. It was a dare. Around the same time, a device the size of a quarter clung to the undercarriage of my truck, a tracker blinking at me like an insult. Meline showed up with HOA compliance inspectors, 2 guys built like gym equipment, and handed me 30 days notice about aesthetics and unlicensed agriculture. I smiled, signed nothing, and installed more cameras. It wasn't all defense. I brought in 15 bee colonies, pollinators officially, sentries unofficially, and the honey they made was mineral bright and wildflower clean, liquid gold that tasted like the mountains kept a secret. It won first prize at the state fair. Drew news cameras that loved my manicured lawn and completely missed the farm whispering below. Visibility was cover. Sometimes the best way to hide something is to let everyone see what they expect. While building a windbreak with salvaged stone, my shovel hit pressure. A vertical jet of water, cold enough to hurt, pure enough to taste time, and lab tests later said it was ancient. Mineral water, rare composition, the kind spas in Europe whisper about at $9 a bottle. Suddenly, Meline's interest in my eyesore made sense. She called an emergency meeting to lecture the neighborhood on groundwater safety, buzzwords polished like mirrors. And that's when Maria Santos walked into my kitchen with a folder and her father's gentleness welded to a blade. Tom's daughter, environmental lawyer, spine of tempered steel, said the thing out loud. They're not protecting the lake, Caleb, they're staking it. The night the hives were smashed felt like a war story, moonless, the sound of 15,000 bees grief-angry in the air, grown men in dark clothes swinging hammers like they were condemning a building. My cameras caught everything. Especially the face of Rick Molina, HOA maintenance, doing his job like someone had bribed his conscience. By breakfast, the videos were online and public opinion turned like a school of fish. Outrage pouring in, and Detective Ray Harrison, Tom's old friend, took it personally. Charges, interviews, pressure, the kind that makes a guy like Rick reconsider who he's taking the fall for. The twist I didn't see coming hit at midnight. An electronically distorted voice on my phone whispering that if I kept digging I'd end up with the same accident as my wife. Emily. The word threaded through me like a wire. I sat there in the dark and decided fear wasn't a strategy one recognized. Data became the weapon. Brett and I launched Save Pinewood Waters through Green Trace, community water testing with lab verification, thousands of households mapping contamination in real time. And what we found wasn't neglect. It was intent. Zones tied to Meline Shell. Companies glowed red on the map, pollution hundreds of times over federal limits, patterns too neat to be random. Maria filed surgical motions, and our inbox pinged with a new ally, Jessica Harper. At the Denver Post, who'd been tracking corporate land grabs and smelled blood. She connected Meline to a multi-state pattern. Environmental cleanup subsidiaries, shell buyers, families squeezed by legal fees until they sold, and in the ugliest footnotes, accidents that never got the investigations they deserved. You hear enough coincidences, and you stop saying coincidence. A geological survey team rolled onto my land at dawn, ground-penetrating radar, core samplers, the whole NASA kit, and mapped an aquifer so vast it rearranged the stakes. Then Jessica surfaced a contract 2 years older than my first fence post, between Meline and Aqua Global, premium water giant, an exclusivity deal salted away in offshore filings with profit projections big enough to make your mouth go dry. Apex Mining had known about the water during copper extraction and dirted the surface to hide it, planning to come back when the statute clock ran out. That's not development. That's a chess game where you poison the board. We baited a trap, planted chatter. I was overwhelmed, planning to sell and disappear, and Meline lunged, filing a sloppy emergency injunction that screamed panic. Meanwhile, Rick flipped under immunity and drew a diagram no one in that courtroom will forget. Wells contaminated on purpose, irrigation lines sabotaged, accidents scheduled like dentist appointments. Maria's eyes didn't blink. Neither did mine. Court felt like a gladiator floor. Judge Martha Williams presided, the room heavy with cameras and breath. Meline walked in, trailing lawyers who thought intimidation was a cologne. Maria stood up and detonated our opening. For 3 months, she'd been a cooperating witness with the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, Wired. Court-ordered access to banking records and emails, every call and transaction captured, a ledger of greed. Brett put our water map on the big screen, 12,000 samples across 7 states. Contamination clustered exactly where our research said it would be, labs and university scientists backing it under oath. And then we played the tapes. You've never heard quiet until you hear a courtroom listening to a person incriminate herself in her own voice. Meline on the line with Aqua Global execs, strategizing about eliminating stubborn parcels, bragging about health events that look natural, the kind of sentences that pull the oxygen out of a room. Rick took the stand and told the rest, photos and payments to match. When the marshals moved in, the suits around Meline realized they weren't defending a zoning squabble, they were orbiting racketeering. Outside, cheers met the cuffs. Pinewood Hills HOA got dissolved by emergency order, assets frozen. Aqua Global stock cratering like a sinkhole. Tom's land was funded back to flowers by the community. Volunteers rebuilding the garden he promised Martha, hands black with soil, faces clean with relief. The governor went on record, federal agencies piled in, and for once the gears of government spun the right direction. 3 months later, Judge Williams handed Melline 25 years and $100 million in forfeitures for victims, a number that felt both heavy and too light. And the night after sentencing, I stood at the edge of my fields as the lake threw a thin silver across the water, and a letter arrived from Zurich. Expensive card stock, perfect English, congratulating me and hinting at global expansion opportunities from international interests. There it was again, the tug on the line. You can win a battle and still hear war breathing on the other side of the hill. A year out, the Pinewood Regenerative Center spread across 200 acres, a place where students and scientists and farmers learned how to bring dead ground back to life, a living rebuttal to anyone who says it can't be done. Brett's Green Trace became a global network, a watchdog with teeth, and Ray, now county sheriff, built a unit that chases environmental crime like it stole something, because it did. Maria grew a law practice that puts shields in the hands of people who never had them. Tom, steady, gentle Tom, teaches kids and elders to coax life from dirt, and his granddaughter Emma, all brains and fire, is designing the next impossible. We harvest 500 tons a month now, food that tastes like the countryside itself, and the mineral water runs under federal protection, used for the community, not siphoned into a billionaire's vanity label. The bees hum like a chorus line everywhere you walk, ambassadors with stripes, proof that if you give a place back its pulse it sings to you. On the 2nd anniversary of the verdict, I took a jar of our first honey to Emily's grave and said, "We did it, Em, something that'll outlive us both." And the tears that came weren't made of grief anymore. They were made of gratitude and dirt and light. I don't pretend we solved everything. That letter from Switzerland sits in a drawer like a question mark. But I know this. A man can stand on poisoned earth and decide not to be poisoned by it, can plant his hands and his hurt and grow them both into something that feeds people. One person with stubbornness and truth can change the math. You know what I mean? So here's where I leave you. In a wide shot at sunset, bees thick in the gold, my fields running green to the lake, the courthouse lights flicking on in town. And in the corner of the frame, a sleek black sedan idling just long enough to make you wonder who's inside and whether they're here to congratulate us or buy the world out from under our feet. That's the question I'm handing you. When community and profit collide, when people like Melline wrap greed in the language of standards, where do you stand, and what do you do when the fight shows up on your doorstep? If this story sparks something in you, tell me in the comments where the line is. What counts as justice? What counts as taking it too far? Who gets to decide what a community should be? And share it with someone who needs a reminder that the ground can heal, and so can we. If you want more true fights for what's right told straight, like this, hit like and subscribe, and then drop your own battle below, because the next case we tackle might be yours.